6 cops, full tactical gear, handcuffs cinched tight, all for unpaid sales tax on a car that burned to ashes in a Texas cornfield 2 years ago. Cody Detwiler, better known as Whistlin Diesel to his 10 million YouTube subscribers, built his channel by destroying expensive vehicles in spectacular fashion. Teslas through lakes, G-Wagons through piles of tires, and yes, a $400,000 Ferrari F8 that caught fire in a cornfield and burned to a crisp on camera, racking up 16 million views. That Ferrari is now at the center of a felony criminal prosecution that should make every American nervous about how far state tax authorities will go to collect revenue. Hey, I'm America's attorney. I've been a lawyer for over 24 years. I've helped almost 3 million people. Let's break down why the state of Tennessee versus Cody Detwiler is prosecutorial overreach masquerading as tax enforcement. In other words, it's completely On November 5th, 2025, a Williamson County grand jury returned an indictment charging Detwiler with 2 counts of felony tax evasion. 1 week later, on November 12th, 6 Tennessee law enforcement officers showed up at Detwiler's door with a warrant for his arrest. The charge? 2 counts of felony tax evasion under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 67-1-1440 subsection G, which makes it a Class E felony to unlawfully and willfully attempt in any manner to evade or defeat any tax due the state of Tennessee in an amount over $500. The indictment alleges that on or about January 30th, 2023, Detwiler and his company, Whistlin Diesel LLC, purchased a 2020 Ferrari F8 and willfully attempted to evade approximately $30,000 in Tennessee sales tax. Detwiler was handcuffed, booked into the Williamson County Jail, and released 3 hours later on a $20,000 bond. If convicted on both counts, he faces up to 12 years in prison and $6,000 in fines. Of course, he also has to pay the underlying taxes if he owes them. Here's what makes this prosecution complete garbage. Detwiler says he never received a single notice, assessment, or demand for payment before the armed officers showed up at his door. Not a letter, not a phone call, not an email, nothing. And they arrested him at the same address where he gets his mail. They knew where he was. Tennessee accelerated from 0 to felony arrest faster than a Ferrari without giving him any opportunity to contest the tax liability, pay the allegedly owed amount, or even know that there was a problem. That's not tax enforcement. That's a shakedown with badges. Now you might be thinking,
but Josh, doesn't the indictment say January 30th, 2023? And that must mean Tennessee investigated this for almost 3 years before filing charges.
and that's exactly the problem. If Tennessee knew about this alleged tax evasion in 2023, or even suspected it, why didn't they send Detwiler a notice? Why didn't they give him a chance to pay the tax or even, contest the liability? Instead, they sat on it, let nearly 3 years pass, and then went straight to a grand jury indictment and a felony arrest. And that's not how tax collection is supposed to work. That's ambush prosecution. If you've watched Cody's video about his arrest, you'll know that he bought his car under his Montana LLC. Let's talk about why the Montana LLC registration exists in the first place. Well, Montana has no sales tax on vehicles. None, nada, zilch, nothing. If you form a limited liability company in Montana and you register your vehicle under that LLC, you can legally avoid tens of thousands of dollars in sales tax that would otherwise be due in high tax states like California, Massachusetts, or Tennessee. I mean, provided that you purchase an expensive car. The process is pretty straightforward. Pay a small filing fee to form the LLC. Designate a registered agent in Montana and register your vehicle there, even if it's a Ferrari. Companies exist solely to facilitate this process, handling the paperwork and providing Montana addresses for registration. It's become so common that Montana now has the highest per capita vehicle registration rate in the country. Nearly 2 vehicles registered for every resident, including little babies. And when you look at exotic cars, the numbers are staggering. The Montana Motor Vehicle Division reports nearly 11,000 registrations of everything from Aston Martin to Paganis. Oh, I need to get one of those. And Ferraris make up almost half of those registrations. Now, here's a critical question. Is this legal? Well, the answer is yes, technically. Montana law explicitly permits anyone, resident or non-resident, to form an LLC in the state. Montana law also permits vehicles to be titled and registered in the name of an LLC. And when an LLC owns a vehicle, the LLC is the legal owner, and because the LLC is a Montana entity, it qualifies for Montana's registration benefits. There's no fraud, no forgery, no misrepresentation. The LLC is a real Montana entity in good standing. As Mitt Romney said,
corporations are people, my friend.
Once Montana issues valid plates and registration, the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution requires every other state to recognize that registration unless they can prove fraud. But here's where Tennessee and some other states have started to push back. Most states have laws requiring vehicles to be registered where they are primarily used or garaged. In Tennessee, if you live in the state and your car spends most of its time there, Tennessee law says that you owe Tennessee registration and sales tax regardless of where you bought it or where it's formally registered. The Tennessee Department of Revenue even has a webpage specifically warning about out-of-state LLC registration schemes, stating that LLCs formed outside Tennessee will still owe tax on vehicles purchased for use in Tennessee, and that the fact that the LLC was formed or is located outside the state does not create an exemption from tax. So we might have a legal gray area. Put a pin in that for just a minute. I'm going to come back to it. Montana says it's legal. Tennessee says it's tax evasion. And the resolution of this conflict depends entirely on whether Tennessee can prove that Detwiler and his LLC were using the Montana registration solely to evade Tennessee taxes that they would have otherwise owed with no legitimate business purpose. That's a factual question that should be decided in a civil tax dispute, not a criminal prosecution. There's actually another issue, which is this. Was the vehicle bought for use in Tennessee? Let's be very clear about what a criminal tax evasion charge requires. The statute says unlawfully or willfully attempt in any manner to evade or defeat any tax due. The word willfully is doing a lot of work here. In criminal tax law, willfully means a voluntary, intentional violation of a known legal duty. It's not enough that you didn't pay the tax. I mean, he didn't pay it. That's undisputed. It's not enough that you should have known that you owed the tax. Whether he knew it or not is irrelevant. The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you knew that you owed Tennessee sales tax and that you took affirmative steps to hide money or assets to avoid paying it. Hey, that's a high bar. And it's especially high when the underlying legal question, whether Tennessee can tax a vehicle registered to a Montana LLC, is disputed and unresolved, and particularly so in this instance when the vehicle was not bought for use in Tennessee, but instead to be destroyed spectacularly in the state of Texas. Here's what the prosecution is going to have to prove to convict Cody Detwiler. First, that Tennessee sales tax was actually due on the vehicle. That requires showing that the Ferrari was primarily used in Tennessee, not Montana, not any other state where Detwiler travels. Second, that Detwiler knew that Tennessee sales tax was due.
Not a letter, not a notice, not anything saying, hey, you owe the sales tax on this car, nothing.
That requires proving that he understood Tennessee's use tax statutes and consciously decided to evade them. Third, that Detwiler formed the Montana LLC for the sole purpose of evading legal Tennessee tax with no other legitimate business reason. And fourth, that this was all done willfully, like with criminal intent to defraud the state. Again.
Okay, like we get it.
Now let's look at the facts that undermine each of these elements. Detwiler purchased the Ferrari in January of 2023, and within months he was using it for his YouTube channel, which is a legitimate business that generates millions of dollars in revenue, just like my YouTube channel. The car appeared in videos where he conducted durability tests, driving on dirt roads, sawing off a mirror, throwing watermelons and rocks at the windows. And then in the video that went viral, he drove it through a Texas cornfield at high speed. Dry corn husks got stuck in the wheels and engine, and the entire car burst into flames. And a rental van parked nearby also caught fire and was destroyed. The Ferrari was completely destroyed. There but for the grace of God go I. Look, we've all gotten dry corn husks stuck in our $1 million cars. It's like, it happens all the time. I don't know. That video got 16 million views. And the Ferrari never made it back to Tennessee. It burned to ashes in Texas in 2023. So what exactly is Tennessee claiming here? That Detwiler should have paid sales tax in 2023 on a vehicle that was used for a business purpose, traveled across multiple states, and was destroyed outside of Tennessee within months of purchase? And remember, the reason that he bought it was to destroy it. I'm sure that law enforcement and the prosecutors have watched some Whistlin Diesel content. They may not have watched enough to know that the reason that he buys anything and everything is always to destroy it. But here's the kicker. Even if Tennessee is right that Detwiler owed the sales tax, the normal procedure is to send a notice of proposed assessment. That notice tells the taxpayer how much they allegedly owe and gives them a chance to contest it or pay it. If Detwiler doesn't respond, the state sends a final demand for payment about 45 days later, which says pay within 10 days or we'll pursue liens and levies. And if there's still no response, the state sends an intent to levy or lien letter, which typically comes about 110 days after the notice of proposed assessment. Only then does the state take criminal enforcement action. It's a lot of due process for civil tax collection. Williamson County skipped every single one of those steps and went straight to criminal prosecution, according to Detwiler. Why? Well, one reason could be that Williamson County, Tennessee, one of the wealthiest counties in America, is hemorrhaging tax revenue to the Montana loophole. They're watching Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and McLarens roll through their county with Montana plates, and they're losing millions in sales tax. So maybe they decided to make an example. They picked a high-profile YouTuber with 10 million subscribers, indicted him on 2 felony counts, and sent 6 cops to his house to arrest him. Maybe the message is clear. If you're using the Montana loophole, we're coming for you. We're not messing around with civil assessments. We're going to go straight to handcuffs and felony charges. But there are 2 problems with that strategy. The first one is, well, okay, it's unconstitutional. The due process clause of the 14th Amendment requires that before the government deprives you of life, liberty, or property, you get notice and an opportunity to be heard. That principle applies to tax collection. Tennessee thinks Detwiler owed $30,000 in sales tax. Fine. Send him a notice, give him a chance to contest it, and if he doesn't pay, pursue civil remedies. Garnish his wages, place a lien on his property, sue him in court. But you don't skip due process and go straight to criminal prosecution. You don't get to do that, especially when the underlying legal question is disputed. And again, it's obvious why Tennessee has gone after Detwiler. First, he's famous, he destroyed the car on camera, and prosecuting him sends a message to everyone else using the Montana loophole. But selective enforcement based on a public profile is exactly the kind of prosecutorial discretion that courts are supposed to check. You can't single out one person with criminal prosecution when thousands of others are doing the exact same thing just because that person happens to be a YouTube celebrity, like me. But the second problem that they have is that they picked the wrong guy. Cody Detwiler is entertaining, but he is also a fighter. They have an axe to grind against him because they gave him a garbage criminal charge 2.5 years ago, splashing water from a sea-doo or whatever, and they made fools of themselves in that case. Well, actually, Cody made fools of them. So this, for them, this is personal. They picked on Detwiler because he made them look stupid in 2024. And I have a really strong hunch that he's going to make them feel stupid yet again. He's not going to back down, and he doesn't have to. He makes a lot of money, and he can afford attorneys. He's going to kick their Tennessee will argue that Detwiler had no legitimate business purpose for the Montana LLC and that he formed it solely to evade their taxes. But that's a factual question, not a legal conclusion. Detwiler can easily point to the fact that he uses vehicles for his business, that the Ferrari appeared in monetized YouTube videos, that he travels across state lines for his work, and that forming an LLC in a state with favorable vehicle registration laws is a rational business decision. Whether that's enough to defeat the willfulness element is something that a jury would have to decide, and that's exactly the problem. The state shouldn't be forcing someone to stand trial on felony charges when the underlying conduct is practiced by thousands of people and the legal question is unresolved. Look, here's what should have happened. Tennessee should have sent Detwiler a notice of proposed assessment, and that notice should have said,
You know, we believe you owe $30,000 in sales tax on your Ferrari. Here's why. You have 90 days to contest this assessment or pay the tax.
if Detwiler disagreed, he could have filed an administrative appeal, presented evidence that the car wasn't primarily used in Tennessee, and argued that the Montana registration was legitimate. If he lost that appeal, Tennessee could have pursued civil collection. I mean, if he didn't voluntarily pay it. That's how tax disputes are supposed to work. But instead, Tennessee skipped the entire administrative process and went straight to criminal prosecution. Because what they're really trying to do is make a fool of Cody Detwiler. They can't just use the criminal justice system to shut down the Montana loophole. They can't change Montana law. They can't force Montana to start charging sales tax. So instead, they're using felony prosecutions to scare Tennessee residents out of using a legal registration process in another state. Well, that's an abuse of prosecutorial discretion. Criminal law is supposed to punish conduct that's clearly illegal and morally blameworthy. It's not supposed to be a tool for resolving disputed questions of interstate tax jurisdiction. The fact that Tennessee is prosecuting this as a Class E felony is particularly egregious. A Class E felony in Tennessee carries 1 to 6 years in prison per count. Detwiler's facing 2 counts, one for himself, one for his LLC, which means he's looking at up to 12 years in prison for unpaid sales tax on a car that no longer exists without any prior notice. That's actually insane. And it's gonna make for a fascinating trial. I mean, assuming Tennessee is foolish enough to actually prosecute this case instead of quietly dismissing it and maybe apologizing. And here's something else that should concern you. Look at the witness list on this indictment. There's one witness, one. Curtis Ritchie from the Tennessee Department of Revenue. That's it. No forensic accountant, no investigator who tracked the car's movements, no testimony about where the Ferrari was actually garaged or primarily used. Just one Department of Revenue employee who presumably told the grand jury he bought a Ferrari registered in Montana, and we think he owes tax on it. And based on that alone, a grand jury handed down 2 felony indictments. And that tells you everything that you need to know about how one-sided grand jury proceedings are. In fact, there's an old saying that says a prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich. And in this case, they indicted a YouTuber and his LLC based on a single witness from the agency that stands to collect money from that guy. How convenient. Here's what discovery is going to look like. Detwiler's attorney is going to subpoena every record that Tennessee has showing how many other people have Montana-registered vehicles in Williamson County. They're going to ask why those people weren't arrested. They're going to ask what criteria Tennessee used to decide who gets a civil assessment and who gets a felony prosecution. They're going to ask whether Tennessee ever sent Detwiler a notice before the indictment. They're going to ask whether Tennessee conducted any investigation into where the Ferrari was actually used before charging him with a crime. And they're going to put expert witnesses on the stand who will testify that Montana LLC vehicle registration is a legally recognized practice used by thousands of Americans, that it's not inherently fraudulent, and that whether it violates Tennessee tax law is a disputed legal question that should be resolved in a civil proceeding. His lawyers might also consider sending a subpoena for the phone records of the investigators to see if they ever reached out to Detwiler's accountant or bankers or anyone else to try to manipulate the situation so they could make him guilty of a crime. Well, here's my prediction. This case, it never goes to trial. Tennessee is going to realize that it opened Pandora's box by pursuing a criminal prosecution without giving notice and without proving willfulness. They're going to offer Detwiler a deal where he pays the sales tax or part of it, some penalties, interest, whatever, and they're going to dismiss the criminal charges. And Detwiler should take it because even though he probably win at trial, no one wants to risk 6 years in prison over a disputed tax bill. But the damage is done. Tennessee has sent a message to every exotic car owner in the state. We're watching you, and if you use the Montana loophole, we might not send you a letter. We might send 6 cops. This case is a perfect example of prosecutorial overreach dressed up as tax enforcement. This is exactly the kind of governmental abuse that should concern every single American, regardless of whether you own a Ferrari or a Honda or no car at all. Because if the government can do this to a YouTuber with 10 million subscribers and the resources to fight back, well, just imagine what they could do to you. Do you think Tennessee was justified in arresting Detwiler without notice? Or is this prosecutorial abuse? Should Whistlin Diesel fight back in court? Or should he just pay up? Drop your thoughts below in the comments. And don't forget to lawyer up with me, America's attorney, by hitting that subscribe button. I will be back soon with more legal breakdowns, and I will see you then. But instead, to be just... You will not, this is not going in the outtakes. If I have seasonal allergies, it's nobody's business but my own. That's a HIPAA violation. A notice of proposed acceptance.